Welcome back to another episode of Live, Lead, Legacy, the podcast where we dive deep into leadership, impact, and the legacy we leave behind. Today, we have an extraordinary guest who embodies all three. I'm your host, Carlos Luna, and whether you're leading a team, driving change in your community, or more importantly, guiding your family to greatness, this is your space. So get comfortable, tune in, and let's dive into this leadership journey together. This is Live, Lead, Legacy, where life and leadership intersect. Today, I'm super excited to join a conversation with Dr. Tyrone Spears. Dr. Spears is a powerhouse in the world of risk and insurance, bringing over 25 years of expertise to the field. As the division chief for the city of Los Angeles, he leads with strategic vision and a commitment to excellence. Dr. Spears is also an adjunct professor at California Baptist University, mentoring the next generation of leaders and world changers. Beyond his impressive career, Dr. Spears has a heart for service. He is the president and CEO of Hazel's Hands, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting foster youth and families, ensuring they have the resources, guidance, and care they need to thrive. Dr. Spears is the author of The Compassionate Leader, Navigating Selflessness in Leadership, a book that challenges us to rethink leadership through the lens of empathy, selflessness, and genuine care for others. I could not be more excited to have him with us today to share his insights on leadership, service, and the power of compassion in driving success. Dr. Spears, welcome to the Live, Lead, Legacy podcast.
Good morning, Carlos. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks. You and I have known each other for a number of years. I think our paths have crossed numerous times at many of the trade events that we've spoken at. And certainly I consider you to be one of the more polished leaders in our industry circuit. I've always wondered, Dr. Spears, what little Tyrone was like growing up. I don't know if you'd be interested in sharing with us a little bit about, your childhood. I'm curious to know if the younger version of yourself was as sophisticated and as, wise beyond his years type of kiddo. What was your childhood like?
Interesting question. Thank you. What a way to start this session. Happy to share what little Tyrone was like. Well, I am the middle child, and I think I have all the characteristics of the middle child, if there are any. I was a very active child growing up, but yet dependable. I got in trouble kind of a lot because I would do kind of mischievous things. Very curious mind, always testing the limits or wanting to figure things out that probably, I shouldn't have been, getting involved in. But again, just experimenting with things and oftentimes, found myself in trouble with my parents. But also, I find it interesting that as I look back to my earlier years as a child or older child and into my teen years, I always found myself in leadership roles or being the leader of the team captain, the class president. And all of these positions I never sought them out. I kind of either were coerced to do them or was voted in, or someone asked me to serve or to lead. And so as I think back on those years and where I am today, it kind of makes sense. Many times I was told by my older family members that, I was kind of an old soul, and I can see that too. But yeah, no, I had a great childhood, a loving family, great siblings. And yeah, I have no complaints, but I can definitely see how it shaped who I am today.
I'm always curious about, how people evolve throughout the years, particularly individuals that are in what I would consider to be highly esteemed leadership roles, right? Like yourself. It's always interesting to me also how individuals find their path into the risk and insurance industry. We hear it oftentimes as we talk to our colleagues around the community that, risk and insurance really isn't one of those industries that you would consider to be sexy or action packed, right? And so certainly something that would be considered off the beaten path for many. I'm curious, in your case, what sparked your passion or your desire for leadership in this work community that is, risk and insurance? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Again, it was another case of me being asked to lead when I had no real desire to lead. So my career started, let's just start back. Well, I was in the legal field and I had an aspiration to be a judge. Growing up, that's what I wanted to be, a judge. Yeah, a lawyer first, of course, and then a judge. And I was in the legal field and came across paths with a vice president in a carrier workers' comp space. Had the conversation. I wasn't really enjoying the position that I had. I still loved the legal field, but didn't really enjoy the position for various reasons. And the opportunity came and asked me if I ever thought about claims. And I was like, well, what is that? Of course, like most people, what is that? And it was explained to me. And I was at a point in my life where I was like, well, why not? Is it 8 to 5? I don't have to work at night. I don't have to work weekends if we're in trial. And they said, no, it's definitely business hours. And so that was one of the main reasons why I was like, okay, I think this is a sign. This person approached me. I need to make a change. And so that's how I got into workers' compensation and risk management. I didn't come through the, claims assistant route. I came right in as a adjuster trainee, and then kind of worked my way up. And so I'm into claims 4 years or so, maybe a little less. I'm not sure. I'm just doing my job, being a claims adjuster. I kind of liked it a lot. And my supervisor, life happened and something caused her to have to take some time away and take a leave of absence to take care of her family member. The manager asked if I would be the acting supervisor or the backup supervisor. Hmm. I'm kind of puzzled because I'm on a team with other adjusters who have 20 years of experience. And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm honored to be asked, but at the same time, a little perplexed as to, how and why me. But I said, sure, I'll be a backup supervisor for my supervisor. And that's kind of how it began. And again, like I said earlier, it kind of is how everything kind of happened. I never said, pick me. Hey, how can I be a supervisor? Hey, manager, I want to be on the management track. Never had any of those type of conversations. It just kind of came to me. And from there, I shadowed behind the supervisor. I filled in when she was out. And there it happens. And then I left that employer, went to another company on the private side. And here I am again, just a senior examiner. And the director comes to me and says, I want to give you special projects, and then moved me into like an assistant manager role. And it just kind of happened from there. So it's just amazing how that happens. But that's kind of my story and how things have kind of transpired for me throughout my career.
What a great story, Dr. Spears. I'm reminded, as a senior leader in my organization and now, having been a chief executive officer for a number of years, I've come to learn, and you probably know this as well at your position, that oftentimes the best leaders aren't always what you would consider the most qualified on paper, right? But it's those individuals that maybe have the intangibles that you're looking for, that have the ability to guide people, to mentor people, to encourage people, to bring people together, to be solution focused instead of, focused on the problem. I suspect that you were that type of individual early on in your career, and possibly the reason why these institutions and these organizations really felt that you were ready for the next assignment. So I'm certainly not surprised by that, just by knowing your personality and knowing your commitment to building up people and building up teams. I'm curious, as I'm hearing you talk, insurance for me, as a mid 25-year-old, when I got into the business, actually left a pretty material mark on me very early on. And I've shared this story before during some of my speaking engagements. Within 7 days of me picking up the phone as a disability claims examiner, I received a call from a beneficiary or claimant that was threatening to commit suicide on the call. I'll tell you, that really made a big impact on me personally, understanding that, what we do for a living, we consider to be just sort of day to day and routine, very administrative in nature, is actually really important and impacts people at a very deep level, individuals that are receiving those benefits. I'm curious, in your own experiences, either growing up as a young teenager or certainly, as a young leader in these areas that you talked about in your journey, was there ever a defining moment that you would say, you know what, this moment really shaped my perspective as a leader, or maybe it changed the way that you view leadership? Was there ever a moment like that for you, Doctor?
I mean, I've had many different moments where you kind of say, hey, look, this is the growth opportunity, or I can see where this has kind of pivot me into a different dimension of leadership or management. And I really can't point to one other than I'll say, and I just shared this the other day when I did a talk down at EWC. We are,
Shout out to EWC.
yeah, shout out to Deborah, Diane. In my organization, they had a leadership exercise called, I don't think, I hope I'm not getting it wrong. Someone can correct me later, but I think it's called Performance 360. Performance 360 is this survey, if you will. It's a battery of surveys, and they survey your direct reports, they survey your peers, they survey your leadership team or your chain of command and peers. And they take these surveys, and then you do a self-assessment of your leadership style, abilities. You answer the questions, and then they answer the question. And so when I got the report back, and at this time I'm feeling pretty comfortable that, I'm a good leader, right? I don't brag or anything like that. I try to stay humble, but again, I believe I'm a good leader. I'm always sharpening my iron and, attaching myself to folks that will help me grow throughout my career. I've always done that. And so I get this report back and I read it, and it's kind of anonymous. It doesn't tell you who wrote it, the comments. And then I had an aha moment, like, whoa, wait a minute. Here's some things I thought I did well that in their eyes, possibly I didn't hit all the marks. And so it was a wake-up call for me. Like, Tyrone, here's some areas that you can work on. We all have areas of improvement, and we all should be growing daily. But that was one mark in my career where I thought it was going to come back, raving reviews, but it didn't. It wasn't horrible. Again, there was some very complimentary remarks, which I was appreciative of. But there was some that was like, wow, had I not received this feedback, I would have missed that opportunity to, grow in those areas. So I always just point back to that exercise of how it was really a defining moment for me to hear the feedback of folks that I was leading, folks that I was leading alongside of. And it was just a great opportunity. And as I said in the session the other day, it's really all about perspective and also being mature enough as a leader and an adult to take the feedback and really look introspectively to see, is there something I need to work on? Because our natural state wants to get offended, right? I've done all this,
Right.
I'm a listen, I hit all the marks, I'm doing things and feel this way about me. And then it could be kind of almost retaliatory as your natural state. But if you really step back, take a moment and digest the feedback. I think that has helped me, or it helped me to grow as a leader. And again, that was over 15 years ago, and it still has an
Mm.
impact on me. I still remember it to this day. I still remember the comments, but I guarantee you, if you surveyed those folks a year or two later, they wouldn't have that to say again. Maybe something new has popped up, but they wouldn't say those comments again because I took that information and turned it into growth opportunity for me.
Gosh, I couldn't have said it better, Dr. Spears. I tell you, one of the things that I look for in leaders in general is the way that they respond to criticism, the way that they respond to this type of feedback that you're talking about, because it really is telling about their mental fortitude, their, in some cases, maturity level, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
as leaders, I think it's important to understand that there will be criticism coming your way. There will be feedback that maybe you don't always agree with. But as leaders, again, we've got to be able to take that information. We've got to do with it what needs to be done, and that is to improve the operation. In some case, the operation is your own approach to leadership. And so I love the way that you put it, in that if those same employees would take that survey again, you rectified the situation, meaning you listened and you took action. And to me, that is a great indicator of not just your maturity level, but certainly your ability to leave in some of these more difficult situations. Something that I've always admired about you, Dr. Spears, is the way that you talk about your family. I love following you on social media, on LinkedIn. And, as I hear you do your talks, your devotion to your family is very clear in the way that you speak about them. Tell us a little bit about your family. I know you have a few children. Tell us about them. What are they like? What are you most proud of as being, a leader in your family?
Thank you, Carlos. Yes, I'm definitely a family man. I have three wonderful children, two boys and a girl. Couldn't be more proud of them. And also my lovely wife, who we've been married over 30 years, and really proud of that. We started our journey young, and we've been together ever since, and our children are a blessing. So yeah, it's just been a pleasure watching my children flourish and grow and develop. Also, I think that's one of our first tests of leadership, is how we lead our family, right? And so I'm very proud of, my children and their accomplishments. My two oldest graduates from college. My youngest is in his first year of college now. And, really just proud as I look at them and look at their growth and development. I see myself and my wife, in them, for sure. I have one child that's, truly takes after me. She's a natural leader, and she has a lot of my characteristics. I know you are a father as well, and that's just one of our joys, is just to watch our children mature and prosper and grow. And so with that, yeah, really great. My son works for Marriott International, uh, a good management role there, and travels the United States with Marriott. My daughter is a creative, and so she's traveling the world as well, doing her work with her company. And then my youngest is a performer, a DJ, a rapper, a dancer. He's definitely another creative, really great story. I have a book out about his story. My youngest is on the autism spectrum. He's high functioning, and he graduated from the STEM Academy, regular education with support. He's in his first year of college, and we're so proud of him. He has a remarkable story. And so for all of my friends out there and families that have a child on the spectrum, just know I understand the story. I understand the daily struggles, but we put our kids first and advocate for their services and supports, and love them. They will grow up to, have a fulfilled life and do what they want to do. And so really proud of our youngest son.
Man, that is so cool to hear, Dr. Spears. You're absolutely right. I feel like leadership qualities transcend from the workplace, certainly to your home with your own family, right? And beyond into your community. I get a kick out of hearing you talk about your children and just the gamut that you run with regard to interests and talent. I happen to be in the same boat as you. I have, a couple of kiddos that are very, driven, motivated by goals. And then I have a couple of other kiddos that are very creative in nature, all about music, love to create, love to dance. And I'll tell you, I see that as a father as the best of all worlds because we
Yes,
get
right.
to experience our children thriving, not just in a technical setting, but also in a setting that quite honestly brings them a lot of joy and a lot of happiness. And so I get a lot of fulfillment from that as well. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, sure.
There aren't many faces more recognizable or people more respected than you in the risk and insurance space. And with such an important position at the city of Los Angeles, Dr. Spears, there are probably a lot of rewarding aspects to what you do for a living. If you had to pick just one, though, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your day-to-day work? Certainly at the city of LA, and then we'll dive a little bit further into some of your community work that you've done, which is incredibly inspirational. But if you had to pick just one element of your day-to-day work for the city that's most rewarding for you, what would that be?
Absolutely. It's helping people. That's one thing that drew me into workers' comp to begin with, right? You still have a touch of the legal environment, which I love, the case law, legislation, settlements, and things like that. So I still had the law feel, but the thing that really solidified it was helping people, helping workers that have been injured on the job, that's going through, a life crisis. And sometimes these injuries are life changing, altering, and you get to impact, you get to make a difference. That aspect is really what I enjoy about our industry, why I stay in our industry, why I always try to share my stories, my experiences with my fellow colleagues. But yeah, it's the people. Helping people is the most rewarding thing about the job, the industry, and my career.
So I visited with a couple of mutual friends of ours. Oh gosh, it's probably been now a couple of months. This was definitely before the holidays over at LA Metro. In fact, probably right down the street from
Street,
you. And
absolutely, they are.
they were kind enough to give me a tour of inner workings of LA Metro. And I got to see some areas that I don't normally go to because I don't have a badge, right? And so
Right, right.
it was actually really cool. But it opened up the conversation, Dr. Spears, about the city of LA's preparation for the upcoming Summer Olympics in 2028. And as you know, the world loves the Summer Olympiad. 2028 will be hosted in the city of LA. And I can't imagine that the city would not go through massive transformations in preparation for this, just global phenomenon. I'm curious to know, from your perspective, if you'd be willing to take us behind the curtain a little bit and talk about the type of preparations from a risk and insurance standpoint that you and your team will need to consider in preparation for such a massive event. What are some of the things on your mind as you think, about the future in hosting this event?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a huge undertaking that we've been working on. I mean, even prior to the pandemic, they were having initial meetings about the Olympics. And I kind of chuckled and laughed and said, wait, we're 10 years away. Like, this is 2018 and we're already having meetings. But again, to your point, this is a huge undertaking, a huge event. The world is watching, millions of people. You have to really make sure there's an infrastructure to move them throughout the city and the county, and even outlining cities. And so, yeah, it's a lot. And we've been working with our other agencies, other cities really collectively trying to make sure from a risk and liability standpoint that everything gets covered, nothing is left undone, right? And one of our biggest concerns is going to be the volunteers, right? When you think about it, a lot of the other areas, we have insurance and, that we'll just extend insurance or get a policy and, all of those certain things. But when you think about the sheer number of volunteers that it takes to put on this big sports show, if you will, it's massive. And how do you make sure that they're covered and what type of coverages are needed? Because again, they're not our employees, so they wouldn't fall under our typical self-insurance model, but we have to find coverages for these volunteers and just the sheer number of volunteers and the number of facilities and locations. And then you think about the housing, the villages that has to be established, and the transportation, and all of the, mass transit is covered, but a lot of people don't think about the private transportation efforts it takes to move officials and dignitaries throughout the city. I mean, that has to be covered. Again, they're not riding around in a city vehicle, so we have to look at all of those areas. It's massive, from facilities to transportation to housing. Amazing to watch it all come together, and a little scary because the calendar doesn't stop, the clock doesn't stop ticking, and you keep moving closer to that date every day. And when it looks like you have a bunch of time, here we find ourselves, even, 3 years away, it's still for us now fourth quarter, right? Because you can't wait till you're 26 or 7 to put these things in place. And then also you have to realize that we've been fortunate, and in my mind blessed, that even before the Olympics come, we have some other major international events that are hitting the city. So it gives us a kind of, pre-preparation, or if you will, we get a pre-show to test it out and see how it works to make sure that we'll be prepared for the Olympics. And as you know, we redesigned, graded the LAX airport, the Los Angeles International Airport, which needed definitely the upgrades. And so we're moving into more modern times with people movers, and that's going to reduce some of the cars that are entering in and out of the airport, because now they can just use people movers to get from rental car stations, hotels, transit trains, which our good friends at LA Metro has been working on for years. And so watching it all come together is really great, but I think we'll have it ready before Super Bowl. We'll have it ready before FIBA. And so it's exciting times for, Southern California for sure.
It's so impressive to think that 10 years ago, somebody had the wherewithal to have a productive meeting about an event that's happening 10 years into the future. I imagine that there's a ton of coordination and planning that goes into something like that. I couldn't imagine the checklist that exists for this type of undertaking, but it sounds like you all have been talking about it for years and continue to tackle it aggressively. So I'm sure the individuals that are going to be traveling to LA to enjoy the Summer Olympics in 2028 will be in great hands.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a while, because I don't know if you recall, we weren't sure if we were getting 24 or 28. So we've been talking for quite some time, because we had an indication we would get one of them. But yeah, so this has definitely been on the city's agenda and conversation for some years now, probably a decade.
Going from such exciting news, right, for the city of LA to a quite contrast. Recently, as the world is aware, several terrible fires swept through Los Angeles. In fact, the Harvard Gazette published last month that at least 24 people died in the fires. Maybe there's more as of today. More than 100,000 were evacuated or displaced, and more than 12,000 structures were burned. Quite apocalyptic, views were seen on television as the media covered the vast areas of damages. Can you help our audience, Dr. Spears, get into your mindset as you led and probably continue to lead the risk and insurance efforts related to supporting first responders and other government employees as they supported the people, right, and the businesses that were affected by this terrible tragedy.
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah, it's been, I can't even explain how, just such a tragedy, and the devastation that we faced in our area since January 7th. And it's been very challenging, right? But one thing I will say, I always try to look at the silver lining, and we had no catastrophic injury, so really happy about that. We're approaching 40 something claims, but as far as our LAFD fire personnel, we had no catastrophic injuries. Which, sure,
Yeah.
if you saw the fires on the news, you saw the level
Oh,
of intensity and how the fires were raging. And so I was very happy and proud that they stayed safe enough that we didn't have any um, catastrophic injuries. However, I mean, we're left with areas that total devastation, look
mm,
like a war zone, right? Kind of just came through there. A lot of our residents or our Angelinos, displaced and unhoused, and even the future of what their housing situation looks like is a little grim, given the insurance issues that we face, the housing market, inflation, and just the available property, right, and land that's available, right? We don't have a lot of areas where there's available housing, so to have this many residents displaced at one time and try to pivot them into other housing, it's really difficult. And it's making a
mm,
already very tense housing market before this happened, right? Where, folks are getting 10 and 20% over asking. We already had that
yeah.
as our, housing markets. And now you have this many people now all, really vying for the same properties. So it's created definitely a challenge for those that are unhoused. But then I think about the cleanup efforts, right? That's our next phase. And
Mm,
the residents, of course, wants that to be done properly, quickly, so they can kind of get back and hopefully rebuild on their own land. But as you know, that's a huge undertaking as well. And so the city in and of itself and the county, I mean, it's jointly, trying to make sure that they're very thoughtful in that process. Then, that's going to
sure.
entail a lot of our city public works staff to, kind of help out. And then we have the Army Corps of Engineers, here, and then there's some third parties. It's actually opened up jobs, actually. They're hiring 2,000
Good.
folks to come in to help with the removal of the debris and things of that nature. But from a risk standpoint, you also want to make sure that they're wearing the correct PPE so that we're
Mm,
not putting, other employees in danger as they move through the cleanup efforts. So now you move from, you know, you want to be safe during the fires, but now it's taking double the staff to come in the cleanup efforts. And we want to make sure that they are safe as well. Because as you can imagine, with that many structures burning and, houses that are filled with all the stuff that we have in our houses, the stuff that's burning definitely is not healthy for us, should not be
right.
consumed. And so we have to make sure that they are safe. And as we move into those efforts, that's kind of where we are now, making sure that, everyone is safe throughout the whole process. And then on top of that, the last couple of days, we've had some unprecedented rains. And so that's creating runoff, that's creating flooding, it's creating mudslides,
Mm,
so you kind of move from one phase and you move into the next. And, I got a call last night, this morning, that, had an injury with just the mudslides kind of moved
mm.
the vehicle and injured some employees, and they kind of got trapped in
Oh,
the mud.
wow.
And so you can imagine that the fires looks very dangerous, but the cleanup and flooding and mudslides are just as dangerous sometimes as fire can be. And so we're trying to manage it all, keep everyone safe, and return folks home at the end of the day. And so that's our goal, to do what we can, work with our safety folks and our other city agencies, and make sure that, we're all, lockstep in this effort.
I love the way that you say, get everybody home. Um, when you think about, the line of work that some of the employees that your department supports, first responders, right? In some cases, these employees that are having to go out in the middle of the night, potentially, right, at risk of being impacted by a mudslide, they don't always leave their home thinking, I'm not coming back, or the next time I enter the door of my house, I will have a cast on, or I will be permanently impaired as a result of something that happened at work, right? And so I love that you see it that way, that your job is to try and create systems, processes, behavior, and support through your departments to make sure that everybody gets home safe, right? I think that says a lot about you as a leader and about the passion that you have for what you do there for the city of LA. I imagine, Dr. Spears, that, in your line of work as a chief for the work comp and risk division of the city of LA, there are probably regular situations where I would say the stakes are high and maybe even the pressure to make difficult decisions are plenty, right? As a leader, with the level of experience that you have managing these types of high-risk scenarios, can you share with us your approach to making decisions in high-stakes situations and high-pressure situations? What approach do you take when you're faced with those difficult decisions?
Yeah, I mean, anyone that works in government knows that's probably a commonplace scenario you find yourself in. You have a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different folks with priorities, maybe their own personal priorities, and then you have to make decisions that is best for the city overall, or at the end of the day, if we're talking fiscal, that it's a decision that is best to show that you're a good steward of taxpayers' money. And so I'm a guy that I have to have the facts, right? I try not to make decisions based on emotion, but based on not having all the facts. I try to get as many facts as possible, given the nature of the decision I have to make. And then sometimes I have to take a minute. I step back. I try not to make a hasty decision if I don't have to. Like, it's not an emergent decision. I have to, answer the question right now. I like to think on it. I'm also one, and I kind of, tell my boss this, I don't like to go down by myself. So I'm one to collaborate. I'm one to talk to, my leaders, my peers, and get other, colleagues' opinion, right? And so sometimes I'll just kind of throw it out there. I may even know which direction I want to go or the decision I want to make, but I love the collaborative effort of just, having a sounding board, throwing this out. Hey, what do you think about this? That's kind of my approach. I like to talk things out, but at the end of the day, I need the facts. I need to have all the facts before I make, really decisions that's going to impact the department, the budget, the program, and things like that. I try to be reasonable and thoughtful when I'm going through my reasoning of how I'm going to make a decision.
So, Dr. Tyrone, you're also involved in an incredibly awesome organization. Of course, I'm referring to Hazel's Hands. Tell us about the organization, the inspiration behind it, and what personal experiences, if any, right, shaped the mission for the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so proud of Hazel's Hands. It's a nonprofit that I launched in 2021, kind of after I finished my last schooling. It was kind of top of my agenda to do. And so Hazel's Hands is a nonprofit organization that supports children and youth in foster care, kinship, and also we work with transitional aged out foster youth, which were foster youth that have reached the age of 18 or older. It all started really from, kind of my childhood. The organization is named after my grandmother, who her name was Hazel. And my grandmother kind of dedicated her life's work to being a foster mom, being an adoptive mom, also just helping women taken in families who were subject of domestic violence and trying to escape an abusive husband. And so I grew up with this, my whole life. My grandmother's house was this kind of house of hope and haven for families and children and women. And so we've always had these, bonus family members in our lives. And I don't even call them bonus family members. They're really my family. And I tell the story of how I was almost a teenager before I realized that several of the ladies that I was calling aunt, my aunts, not my biological aunts. I was born, they were there. I always thought they were my mother's sisters. And it was a wake-up call once when one of my grandmother's daughters, their biological mother had passed away in another state, and someone made the statement that my aunt so-and-so was going to Texas to her mom's funeral. And I was, perplexed, as you can imagine, 11-year-old, 10-year-old, however old I was. And I'm like, what do you mean? Grandma, what? I'm totally confused. Like, what are you talking about? And then that's kind of the point that I realized that these were not my mother biological
Wow.
sisters. These were my grandmother's adoptive daughters. And so it's just, we've been a blended family like that. I came into this world. They were already there. Their children are, my cousins. And that's how we relate today. I don't call them, my bonus family. I said it for this interview, but they're my aunts, they're my cousins, uncles, and that's just how it is, and that's how I was raised. And we're one big happy family, and so that's kind of how it started. And so I've always had that kind of giving nature, just watching how my parents and my grandmother and how they served. As children, we had to serve as well. I mean, many Saturday mornings we were down in Skid Row in the downtown area feeding homeless. It's just what my grandparents did, and we had to do it. Our parents had to do it, and we were there and serving and in the background helping fix plates. It's just how I was raised and what we've always done. And
Mm.
so anyway, I've always volunteered in the space, and I was a mentor with a couple group home for teenage boys for the last 15, 18 years. And then, I've seen some things that, I liked, and I saw some things I didn't like. And I'm just that type of person. If, I see a need and I can help, then that's kind of what I do. And so since I didn't really like what I saw there or how they were doing it, I said, I can do it better. So I said, as soon as I have time, I'm going to start an organization and make sure that, we're meaningful, we're thoughtful, and that we're showing love to these children that are in this foster system. And that's what we did. And we started our organization. We're 100% volunteer based. We don't have any salary or stipends. My whole board, we all work. We're all taken care of by our careers and our jobs.
Wow.
And we make sure that, everything that comes in goes back to the families and the youth and the young adults that we serve. And it's been so rewarding. It's so rewarding to talk to the children and the family and the resource families, and also to hear the stories. I mean, it will truly pull on your heartstrings just to hear the
Mm.
stories from some of these kiddos. And again, we all have busy schedules. So, we don't do housing. We're not into placement, but we find ourselves, or we call ourselves really, we're just that encouraging cheerleader in the background, letting them know that somebody cares about you, someone is rooting for you, you know, stay in school, get your education, because that's really going to be how you change the trajectory of your life, and you'll be able to create, your own families and life stories, and you don't have to be a product of what you've been through. And so that's really how we see ourselves, and that's how we present ourselves to the folks that we serve. And it's just really been so rewarding watching the smiles on their faces And one particular group that I'm really proud of is the students that are at university level. And we really celebrate them. We wrap
Mhm.
around them. We buy all of the incoming freshmen, former youth, former foster youth. We buy all of their dorm essentials when they show up to Summer Bridge. I mean, everything. It's kind of sad that some of them show up with a backpack or a duffel bag, and just
Mm,
really a small amount of things. They don't have bedding.
sure.
They don't have anything you need to move into a dorm. And so we're right there to wrap around and provide that. We provide laptops. But in our mind, we really celebrate these young adults because if you can go through the foster care system and we hear the stories and all the trauma that that entails and able to go to school, and sometimes they switching schools multiple times a year, right? But you can get the
Mm,
grades to make it to university level. I mean, we're going to support you. We're going to stand with
wow.
you, and we're going to be right
Yeah.
there. And so we're community partners for those students. When there's a food need, we get a call. We provide food cards for those that don't have meal plans or things like that. We just started getting into buying refrigerators for their dorm rooms. They had a couple instances where they were having some challenges just with community refrigerators. Again, I had my kids went to college. I know how it is. And so, we're there to support that. I mean, support them in that and whatever it takes. I mean, we've had someone reach out and say that I need this special lab fee. I can't afford it. It's not covered in my tuition. We paid the lab fee, right? We paid for food handling cards, classes so they can work in fast food industry, things that they may not get coverage for. We're right there to fill that need because we want them to stay in school and not let, the finances stop them or, all the other necessities that we need in life. And so we really do celebrate our former foster youth as they transition into young adults.
That is so incredibly awesome to hear you talk about how you stand, shoulder to shoulder with the university level students. I can't help but think, Dr. Spears, that this program is going to produce some amazing leaders, individuals that have been through, gosh, unfathomable hardship and still manage to come out ahead, still manage to get an education, still manage to get a job. Can you imagine the impact that they're going to have in this world? That's so great. Such an awesome cause. I'm curious, Dr. Spears, from your experience in having worked with foster youth and foster families as long as you have, what is the biggest challenge for foster youth that they face, and how does your nonprofit help them overcome those challenges? I know you talked about, just going through the foster care system, right, is a huge challenge in and of itself. But from your perspective, what is the biggest mountain that they have to climb?
I mean, it's kind of twofold. And so when you think from a social emotional, it's consistency, right? And that's what we hear the most. And I think that's what has made us a trusted partner in their lives is because we're there. We're there this year. We're going to be there next year. And we've heard that before. And we've not only heard that, but I've seen it. I've been to transitional short-term residential therapeutic homes, which is the new name for group homes. And I'll go in the first year, our team, and some of the kids, the young adults, the kids are standoffish, like they don't want to interact with you. They don't really want to speak other than,
Mm,
they say hi because the staff said you need to come and speak, but then it's like, we don't want to have anything to do with you. They go back to whatever they were doing. They don't engage at all. And so that's a story that I tell. There's this one young man, and the first year we came, it was during the pandemic. So we're already kind of like, trying to stay our distance. We had on masks, but we went and dropped off the stuff for the holiday. But he wasn't reciprocal. He said hi because they made him, but he went back and started playing his video game. He didn't really want to talk to us. And then naturally, there's some kids in there, they're just happy somebody else is here. There's guests. They want to tell us about
yeah.
whatever. They're talking to us. And we come back the next year and he sees us and he's engaging with us, right? So I had to get opportunity to talk to him. And I said, hey, how are you doing? And again, he's trying to tell the other kids kind of, calm down. Like, this group has came to see us, and, he's kind of leading the pack now. And so we had a chance to chat real quick. And I said, hey, man, how are you doing? Good to see you again, this, that, and the other. And he was like, you came back. I said, yeah, we came
Mm.
back, and we'll be back again. And he said, yeah, I mean, many times people promise stuff in my life, and, they don't come through in the promises. And so it's hard for me to trust people. It's hard for me to, let my guard down. But I really appreciate you guys coming back and thinking about us. And, it really touched my heart, because he was kind of, hardcore the first year. Like, it was clear he didn't want to have anything to do with us. And the next year he's trying to tell the others, like, hey, these are good people. Like, come on in here, and, let's talk to them. And so again, that just warmed, my heart and my team's heart.
Yeah.
But again, when you talk to him, we had this one young man who came to, he shared his story at our luncheon. He's a college student. He'll be there this year again with a special surprise. But he shared that from the age of 9 to 17, that he was moved 12 times to 12 different foster
Wow.
homes.
My
Because not
gosh.
only was he a foster child, but he had a disability. And I guess it was just too much for families, or they didn't want to kind of deal with that. But he said it was always the pain of going to sleep at night, not knowing if, the social worker was going to be there the next day to move you somewhere else. And I had to, go to bed every night with that on my brain. And I said, wow, I mean, that's kind of the level of trauma that some of these kids are going through. You just don't know if today is my last day here and I have to get used to another, resource parent, and another house, and another school, another area. So it's hard for them to make connections, because they don't feel like it's stable, it's going to be there. So why be vulnerable, let your guard down, if you're not even sure this is going to last? And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges in my mind is consistency. They've been let down so many times. So when you offer that consistency, they see you time and time again. You show up when you say you're going to show up, then they appreciate that. And then they, they become attached to you. It's kind of funny when I go to the college now and we have an event, the directors always say, oh, you're such a big celebrity here now. And again, I don't know that it's celebrity status, because again, I don't look for that. I don't do it for that. And anybody that knows me, well, I'm not going to say people that know me. What they don't know about me. And here's something I'm going to share with folks right here on Carlos Luna's podcast, is that naturally, by nature, I'm an introvert. And people look like there's no way I am. My natural state would be an introvert. And I usually characterize myself, I'm a popular introvert. People know me. I know a lot of people. I'm up and I can talk and I have no problem. But my natural self is to have a small group of people in a small setting, kind of privately, and not in the big crowd and in the mainstream. And that's just who I am. So people always laugh about that. So I really kind of a little uncomfortable with a lot of stardom. And I get it all the time, just by nature of my position and nature that I speak a lot. So a lot of people speak, but again, my natural self is like, this is not, I don't crave this type of attention, but it happens, and I know how to carry myself within it. But yeah, it's fascinating to see these little young souls just trying to navigate life.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about your natural inclination to want to, keep to yourself. I certainly would not have picked that up on you. Hearing you talk about it now, though, there are subtle cues, I think, that you give to people because of that natural inclination, right? To want to be in a small room with a few people, as opposed to at a conference speaking in front of 300 people and having to shake hands afterwards. I totally see it. So I'm getting a kick out of you talking about that. Is there a misconception, Dr. Spears, as it relates to foster children and foster youth, that people might have about these, young kids, that we should be aware of and work to change the narrative? Are there any misconceptions in your mind that you've come across?
I think the main misconception is that some of these kids are labeled as difficult, hard to deal with, and they have behaviors. But if you peel back the onion and look behind the layers and look at the trauma and what they've been through, it kind of could tell the story of why they act the way they act or how they act out. But a lot of them are loving children. They just wasn't loved properly. They wasn't given the proper attention, or they were raised in an environment and exposed to they were exposed to things at ages they should never have been exposed to. So it creates this hardness. And while they may be labeled as difficult, they're really just craving attention. They're craving love. They're craving someone to care. And when those needs are met and are provided, many times you'll see a different child. The problem is when it goes on for so long into their teenage years, you then kind of start to shape who they become. And it becomes a little more difficult to crack that and to get inside and really change that. But I would say the most misconception is that these kids are loving and they really just want to be loved, and receive that nurturing attention that they haven't received. And so that would probably be my main thing that I hear people say, or even if I talk to, folks in the school setting, when they talk about sometimes the students that are in the foster system, they just kind of feel like they're a little, they don't care, like they've just checked out on life. And I'm like, that's not really what it is. When you get to know them, you get to know their story, it explains why, but you still sometimes have time to kind of change and reshape that by just showing a little care and concern. And it's unfortunate also that some of the resource families, I mean, there's a lot of very good ones, don't get me wrong, but then there's a lot of them that are just transactional in nature, which is just a job, it's just a check for the resource family. And there's really no parental, familial love, care, or concern. It's really transactional. And so the child responds to that as well. If they feel like you're just doing your job to be my babysitter until I'm 18, and there's really no real care and concern, the child knows that and they pick up on that. And so, again, it's so big. It's a problem that won't be fixed anytime soon or by any one person or small group of people. But the way I see it is we touch one life at a time. We keep touching those lives. That number will continue to grow day by day, month by month, year by year.
Dr. Spears, how can members of our audience support Hazel's Hands today and into the future?
Yeah, thank you. So we are 100% volunteer based organization and 100% donor based organization as well. We don't really have any federal grants or anything like that. We have one major fundraiser that's coming up on March 8th. We'll be at the Knoxbury Farm Hotel. We have our annual luncheon, so that's where we raise a good number of dollars. That helps our operating budget. You can always go to our website, www.hazelshands.com, and you can always make a donation there. Try to create volunteer opportunities, but because of our size and nature, we don't have any real big events where we need a lot of volunteers, but sometimes there may be volunteer opportunities. But again, just know any dollar donated goes right back to the youth and young adults that we serve. So I know I talk to a lot of people and they say, I have a struggle giving to charities because I don't know where the money's going. Just know that we're good stewards of the funds that we receive, and we put it right back into the programs and the youth that we serve. Again, we have no salary, stipend, overhead. We all do this on a volunteer basis, and we transparent. And again, we are just out there trying to help serve to make a difference in that population. So feel free to reach out to me anytime if you want to know more about our organization, but our website kind of lays out who we are, what we do, and what we serve. And we usually post pictures of all of our events that we do with the kids, or, whatever we do, so you can see the products and services that, we offer them, or programs, not products, that we offer them.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Spears. We definitely
Sure.
will champion the cause and
Thank you.
encourage our audience to support Hazel's Hands. So, in addition to chief executive,
Mhm.
adjunct professor, nonprofit founder, and CEO, you recently added author to your list of accomplishments. You published the book, The Compassionate Leader, Navigating Selflessness in Leadership, in February of last year, 2024. So it's still a very young book. And certainly in a world that often prioritizes results over relationships, Dr. Spears, why do you believe compassion is a critical leadership trait?
Because I mean, just quite frankly, people, our staff, is the core of any business, any operation, any company, any organization. If you don't have people, you don't have a business. And so if we don't take care of the people that helps our business succeed or our products succeed, then, what really have we done? And so I think that, and I know human resource is kind of a term that they're trying to move away from, but I think that our employees are the most important part of any business, in any organization. And so to be an effective leader, in my mind, you have to put your employees first, right? You have to think about them and really just be compassionate and caring. There's a difference between being compassionate and caring and being a pushover or leading with your emotions. And that's not what I mean, and that's not what I talk about in my book. But to be a selfless leader, really putting other people's first, really also kind of moves into and marries well with the servant leader, right? Being a servant leader, really serving others, as we lead. And I lead by those principles, try to be a leader that cares, truly cares about my staff, even my colleagues, and even my superiors. I care about people, and I try to emulate that and make sure that that's shown in my leadership style and my day-to-day interactions with my staff.
As the business landscape has evolved over the years, at least in my experience, Dr. Spears, I don't know if you would agree with this statement or not, but I've noticed that in the workplace, at least in the more progressive workplaces, there is an understanding that when people come to work, all their stuff, good or bad, comes to work with them, right? And so they could very well be going through a grieving process for a family member. They could be in the throes of a divorce proceeding, right? They could be going through, they could be one of these foster children that grew up and they're still grappling with the trauma, right, that they sustained as a teen or as a child. You never know what somebody is going through. And so it's unreasonable for us as leaders to expect our team members, our employees, to check that stuff at the door, right? And so as I was looking at your book, I just kept thinking, wow, what a great solution to help equip this generation of leaders to deal with those types of complexities in the workplace that exist, right, with our employees. If you were to provide advice to a leader, Dr. Spears, about balancing compassion with accountability and tough decision making, what advice would you give that leader?
I would say you have to be open, right? You have to be open. You have to be able to communicate, with your staff. And when I say that, I give the example. If you have an employee that historically has not had, any real problems or any, thing that has risen to the level where, they needed discipline or something like that. So say you have an employee that has been pretty much a very good employee, even a fair employee. And then you start to see some different behavior, maybe absenteeism, they're late now. How do you handle that employee, right? And I tell supervisors all the time that if your first line of defense is discipline, you have a problem, right? You're not looking at this the right way, in my opinion, right? Did you have a conversation, right? Just simply asking the question, Carlos, is there something, going on? How's everything going? I noticed that you've been late a couple days. I noticed you're taking a little more time off than you normally had. What's going on? And you do it in a way where your tone, your body language, is inviting and it's showing care and compassion, as opposed to, a negative tone. And you can say the same thing several different ways, and it's how it's really received. And so everything has to line up. Your communication, your tone has to line up. Your tone, your body language has to match the words that you're saying. And so having that conversation, and really allowing the employee to talk. Because I come to realize when employees trust you and they value you as a respected leader, they feel comfortable sharing with you as, they should, as much as they should, right? Without oversharing. And that's how you handle that. And then that's when you come to find out that life happens. Life happens for them. Life happens for you. And it's just, a matter of time before we may be faced with that, rough patch in our lives. And so having that human effect, that it's not about the operation all the time. It's not about the job all the time. But what are you dealing with? What needs do you have? And how can we help? Right? And not really looking at it to address discipline, but looking at it as, how can I help you? Once they identify, hey, look, I have a parent that's going through this medical. Okay, so let's talk about options here. Are you aware that you can take this leave or that leave? Here's what's available. And that's what I try to do. And then when you do that, what you do is you create a loyal employee if you handle them right and you handle their situation right, because what they see is an employer that cares. I have a supervisor that cares, right? And that employee is going to be loyal to you, to the organization, if they feel like they matter as a person, that they're valued, and that their company, their supervisor, their manager care. And that's kind of the difference, right? But if you, on the other hand, if you have an employee that's, they start off with chronic absenteeism, tardiness, then, you have a discipline issue. You have an employee that, have some behaviors that need corrective action. And you need to know the difference between the two. You can't treat those two scenarios and those two employees the same way. And that's being an effective leader, is knowing the difference of when someone is going through something that's not normal and not usual, and an employee that really has behaviors that has to be corrected if employment's going to continue. But you have to be dialed in, and you have to know your staff, and you have to talk. You have to open those lines of communications with your staff so that you can understand what they may be going through, or that they need something else to help them through this time.
You make some very important points. The fact of the matter, Dr. Spears, is that there is a cost associated with high turnover. There is a cost fiscally to a company, to a nonprofit, to a government agency when you have a revolving door of employees. I see compassionate leadership as a very viable solution to that. I feel that you're really advocating for such a potent way to save your company a lot of money as it pertains to turnover and, quite frankly, productivity increases, right? The work product for these individuals, when you create this type of work environment for your employees, I think the work product just gets so much better because they want to be there. They're not, stressed out about not wanting to be there, not giving their best effort. You're creating advocates of success, right? They're aligned in your mission. They're aligned in your values. They're treating your customers well because you've taken this human connection approach to leadership. It's fantastic. I would ask you, Dr. Spears, maybe as a final question on your book here, but bringing it home to where we work, right, in risk and insurance.
Yes.
In your opinion, how do you cultivate compassion in these high stakes environment, right? Such as, let's say, in a public sector, in a government setting, in a risk management program where that risk manager's job is to think of the worst possible scenario that could happen, right? And work to try and mitigate the risks associated with that scenario. What advice would you give risk managers today to foster compassionate leadership in those environments?
Again, I think if we're talking from a work comp standpoint, it's still the injured worker matters, right? And how we take care of them, and making sure that we're using the tools we have in our hands and the tools that we have available to provide that injured employee with the resources they need to recover, get well, and get back to work. I have a motto that I use and I've been using for many years. And that motto is, how can we get to yes? There's so many ways we can say no. We're supported by saying no through the labor code, possibly through regulation, through case law, through UR decisions. We can say no. But is that really the right thing to do? And I really try to look in my program when I'm setting up programs or thinking about a workflow is, how can we get to yes? Yes, I possibly can say no, but is that really for the greater good of the injured worker? Is it going to really move this claim forward? If I give, for instance, the treatment guides may say 24 visits of physical therapy, and then that's it. So yeah, you have now a mechanism to say no on that 25th visit. But is 6 more visits going to make or break whether this employee comes back? If they only need 6 more, and then you can get them where they need to be. Even though we're allowed to say no because you've hit that 24, is giving 6 more the right thing to do? And do you have the power to give the 6 yes? Because you can always approve, you can always give more, you just can't take away. And those are the type of things that where we are empowered to do something that's going to help someone get to whatever the desired goal is, return to work, surgery recovery, settle claim, or whatever the case may be. And so I think really using the tools we have to help that injured worker rather than saying no because we can, is no really the right decision in that case. So that's what I would say. When you look at risk management and insurance, it's a little more different. You're looking at coverages and things like that. So I think just being mindful, making sure that, again, you are being helpful and not a hindrance. You're looking at policies and programs that's going to help the organization, right? And not try to, get a policy with lower limits to make you look like a superstar because you don't think that huge loss is coming, and then the huge loss comes, and then it's like, whoa, we're not really covered for that.
Right.
Was that the best decision? Were we
Right.
really looking out for the organization, or were we looking for self-gain to say, look how much I've saved in premiums, but really your program is not fully covered the way it should be. You're just, assuming that that big loss is not coming because it hasn't come in your career, or hasn't come, during your time of managing the program. And so I would just say, be ethical, be transparent, and, make sure that we're doing the right thing for the greater good and not for our own, self-gratification.
Well, speaking for myself, Dr. Spears, your book is going to become a main staple on my iPad. It's got some great notes in it that I've already put in my back pocket. So great job on the book.
Thank
To
you.
our audience that might be watching, our deep stable of financial backers have agreed to raffle off 3 copies of The Compassionate Leader to the individuals who engage with our YouTube page. So hopefully that's okay with you, Dr. Spears.
Absolutely.
If any of our audience is interested, be sure to visit our YouTube site, subscribe, like, and comment on this video, and you'll automatically be entered to win a free copy of The Compassionate Leader. So as we wind down our conversation today, Dr. Spears, in my opinion and in my expertise, an individual, a professional, if you will, is more likely to be more passionate, more driven to succeed when they realize that, this world will keep record of their contributions, number one, to society, certainly to their immediate communities, right? And probably most importantly, to their families. Would you share with us your heart about the legacy that you hope to leave behind in your work, in your benevolent service through Hazel's hands, through, your education efforts, as well as with your family? What do you want that legacy to look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carlos. I mean, I think that when I think about legacy, and I'm very focused on legacy and leaving a legacy in everything that I do, I want to make sure that it's purposeful. I think I just want people to remember me by, Tyrone was a good person, right? That I cared, I gave, I didn't mind sharing what I have. And when people ask me all the time, they say, oh, we see you speaking at this conference or this, that, and the other. And I'm like, I'm just sharing my experience and my knowledge to my colleagues, right? I don't do it for self glory, just to be on a platform. Sometimes I'm like, why am I here? I have other things I need to be doing. But
Right.
I don't mind giving back. And I'm just a giver by nature. And I hope that I will be remembered by my peers and colleagues that I was always willing to give of my time, to give a smile, a hello, and by my children that I gave them a good start.
Dr. Spears, thank you again for taking the time and your willingness to share your wisdom, and certainly for being willing to be vulnerable and sharing with us your personal experiences, both professionally and personally. We certainly wish you continued success, and I really hope and pray that all of the work that you're doing through Hazel's hands and the work that you and your family continue to invest yourselves in produce incredible outcomes in the communities that you serve. I want to speak to our audience once again. You can connect with Dr. Spears on LinkedIn and Facebook by clicking on the links in the description section of this podcast. You can also purchase your copy of The Compassionate Leader on Amazon and make a tax-deductible donation to Hazel's Hands by visiting their website. We'll be sure and post these links at the bottom as well. Thank you again for joining us today on Live, Lead, Legacy, where we explore stories, strategies, and successes that inspire leaders to have a lasting legacy. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration on their leadership journey. Please be sure to show your support by visiting and purchasing an item from the podcast store at newraincap.com. Your small gesture will go a long, long way. For more insights, resources, and updates, be sure to follow us on all of your major social media outlets: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next time, remember, live with intention, lead with impact, and build a legacy that matters.